My sons told me I wasn't really their father, so I stopped pretending to be. They didn't see it coming. It all started on a regular Thursday evening. I had just wrapped up another exhausting shift at work, looking forward to some peace and quiet. But the house felt strangely empty when I walked in, quiet in a way that didn't feel right. My wife was sitting at the kitchen table, staring down at her phone like it held the secrets of the universe. The boys were nowhere in sight. As I set my briefcase down, she glanced at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Where are the boys?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She didn't respond right away, just kept scrolling, like she hadn't even heard me. Then I caught it. A faint murmur of voices, muffled, coming from the back part of the house. Odd, considering the rear door was always supposed to be locked. I followed the sound without much thought at first, but the second I stepped into the hallway, I saw them, my sons, through the open living room door. They were seated together on the couch, heads leaning in close like they were sharing secrets. I couldn't catch every word, but the ones I did hear felt like a knife. "We don't have to call him Dad anymore," one of them said. "He's not even our real father." "I can't believe Mom actually married that guy," said the other. I froze in place. My breath caught in my throat. The words didn't just hurt, they stunned me. How could they say that? I'd been there since the beginning. From their first steps to scraped knees. School projects, late-night study sessions. I was the one who showed up. I was their dad in everything but blood, whether they wanted to admit it or not. I should have barged in and demanded an explanation. But I didn't. Something in me cracked, and I needed space to even think. So I backed away slowly. Heart pounding, mind racing. The rest of the night passed in a fog. They barely spoke to me, barely acknowledged I was even there. No eye contact, no small talk, just cold detachment. My wife didn't mention it either. She sat there sipping her wine, avoiding my gaze like the rest of them. That night, long after the house had gone still, I lay awake, replaying their words over and over. Not our real father. Where had I gone wrong? What had I missed? I started digging through memories, looking for any clue, any misstep. All I ever tried to do was be present, to fill the space their biological father left behind when he walked out on them. The next morning, I got up early. My wife was still asleep. The boys were already at the kitchen table, phones out, thumbs scrolling. The tension in the air was undeniable. Everything felt different, colder. I needed clarity. More than anything, I needed to understand. So I asked them, "Do you really think I'm not your dad?" Neither of them looked up. One of them muttered, "You're not. You never really were." It hit like a gut punch. Time slowed. My ears rang, and they just sat there. Not angry, not emotional, just indifferent. They said it like it was nothing, like I was nothing. I stood there, staring at them, trying to grasp what had just happened. No remorse, no hesitation, just dismissal. "Well," I said, voice tight, "if that's how you feel, I guess there's no reason for me to act like a dad anymore." Still no reaction. Their eyes stayed locked on their screens. I didn't even know if I meant it at that moment, but the words left my mouth, and they hung there like smoke. I turned and left the room. No one stopped me. For the next few days, I stayed true to what I said. I stopped doing the things I'd always done for them. No breakfasts, no reminders, no checking in after school, no help with homework, nothing. At first, I don't think they even noticed. They'd gotten so used to everything being handled that my absence probably didn't register. But soon enough, things began to shift. The first crack showed on the fourth morning. I was at the table with a cup of coffee and the newspaper. One of them came downstairs, still half asleep. He stood there for a moment, then asked, "Aren't you making breakfast?" I shrugged. "I don't know. Do you even need me to?" He blinked at me, not angry, just confused. The next day, he didn't ask again. By the end of the week, the entire atmosphere in the house had changed. My wife noticed it too. She could tell something had shifted. She saw that I wasn't picking up the pieces anymore, that I wasn't stepping in to help when things fell apart. One Thursday evening, she finally asked, "Why are you acting like this? Why aren't you taking care of them?" I didn't even glance away from the television. I'm not their father anymore. They don't see me as one. So why should I keep pretending? Her silence said more than words could. She hadn't expected that answer. But I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. As the days passed, the boys began to show signs that they were unsettled. They didn't seem to fully grasp what had happened. They couldn't figure out why I wasn't stepping into the role. They were used to me playing. It was like they hadn't even realized how much I had done for them. Not until I stopped. And that's when the shift began. At first, it was subtle. A few quick glances between my wife and the boys. But that was it. They'd still walk past me in the hallway, without so much as a glance. Like I was just part of the furniture. The house felt hollow, empty of warmth, empty of joy. It was a sharp contrast to the home we once had. But I kept my distance. They had drawn the line when they told me I wasn't their real father, and I wasn't going to cross it again. Then, one evening, the tension reached its limit. The boys had been especially withdrawn that day. We ate dinner in silence, their eyes focused on their plates, like the food was more interesting than anyone at the table. The weight of everything unspoken hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. After dinner, one of them finally said it. "Why don't you help us anymore?" His voice was small, uncertain, but it had a sharpness I couldn't ignore. I didn't even look up from my book. "You said you didn't want my help," I said. He shook his head, eyebrows furrowed. "That's not what we meant. We didn't think you'd just stop being there." I looked at him, voice flat and cold. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you said I wasn't your dad." The words hit him hard. I could see it in his face. Confused, unsure how it had gotten this far. "But we didn't mean it like that." He tried again. "We were just what?" I cut in. "You were just mad? You didn't think how much it would hurt to hear that? To be dismissed like I was nothing?" Silence swallowed the room. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For once, he didn't know what to say. It was finally starting to click. That I wasn't some stranger. That I had been there. For both of them. My wife, who had stayed quiet until now, finally spoke. "You don't have to be like this." I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how. I had given this family everything. My time, my effort, my love. And they had tossed it aside like it meant nothing. "Maybe I don't," I said at last. "But I'm not going to act like nothing happened either. You all made it clear where I stand. I'm just the guy who pays the bills and fixes broken stuff, right?" My wife looked at me, her expression softening. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't need an apology. I just needed them to understand what it felt like to be pushed away. The days that followed were filled with tension and quiet realizations. The boys started to notice that their mom wasn't trying to step in anymore. She wasn't running interference. She wasn't patching things up like she always had. And I think that hit them harder than they expected. They had grown used to the comfortable dynamic, where I was the one who handled everything. The father, the fixer, the provider. But now that I had stepped out of that role, the balance in the house had collapsed. They were lost without it. My absence left a hole they didn't know how to fill. By the end of that week, I had stopped doing everything. No lunches. No reminders. No fixing broken things. No questions about their day. If they spoke, I barely responded. If they wanted a dad, they could go find the one who left them. One night, I was sitting on the couch, reading, when the youngest walked in. He hovered for a moment before sitting beside me, nervously twisting his fingers. "Dad, can we talk?" I didn't look at him. "About what?" I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We didn't mean what we said. I didn't think it would hurt you." I let the silence settle. His words felt heavy, but I was still carrying anger. I wanted to believe him, but how could I be sure? This wasn't just discomfort talking. I turned a page in my book and said nothing. "You should have thought about that before." His shoulders sank. I thought he might cry, but he didn't. He just sat there, face pale, full of guilt. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I reminded myself, this was the consequence. This was what I'd been left with. It wasn't until the next day that the impact truly hit home. My wife came up to me, frustration clear on her face. "You've made your point," she said. "But why are you punishing them like this?" "I'm not punishing them," I replied, voice calm, even though I was barely holding it together. "I'm giving them space. They don't get to shut me out and expect me to act like everything's normal." She stared at me for a long time, searching my face for something. Then she sighed. "I think they get it now, but you're making it harder. You're being unfair." I stood up, tired of the same argument. Fair? They're the ones who started this. The next few days passed in a haze of awkward silence, stiff interactions, and weak attempts at normalcy. The boys didn't say much, didn't ask for anything, didn't try to hide how uncomfortable they were. And for the first time, I saw how far apart we'd drifted. They were starting to regret what they'd said. That much was clear. But was it too late for me to care? It wasn't until that weekend that the shift became undeniable. The same sons who had avoided me for days now looked at me differently. There was something new in their eyes, a realization. They were starting to feel the same thing I had been carrying all along. Unseen, unwanted, pushed aside. This wasn't just about the words anymore. It was the silence that followed, that finally broke through. I didn't know how long I could keep going like this. A part of me hoped they would figure it out, that they'd understand what they'd thrown away. But another part of me wondered if they ever really would. They didn't see it coming, not at all. One Saturday, my wife asked if I'd go with her to a parent-teacher meeting for the youngest. I hesitated. There was still too much hanging between us. So many unspoken words, so much tension, and neither of us knew how to cross the gap. I knew she was hoping that showing up together might help smooth things out, that maybe acting like a united front would push us back toward normal. But I didn't want to pretend, not when everything still felt broken. "I'll go," I said flatly. We got to the school, and from the second I stepped inside, everything felt unfamiliar. It had been years since I'd been to one of these things. My son was seated at his desk, His posture slouched, eyes shifting back and forth between his mom and me, like he was bracing for something bad. We sat through the usual conversation. Grades, behavior, progress reports. But my mind wasn't on any of it. What got to me was how my son refused to look at me, like I was just some stranger sitting in on the meeting. When it ended, we stood outside in the cool fall air. The breeze cut through our jackets. But that wasn't what chilled me. It was what my wife said. You need to talk to them. She said quietly, urgently. I have. I replied, not even looking at her. And they made it pretty clear where they stand. They're not going to figure it out on their own. She said, you're their father. You're supposed to show them how. I stopped walking. Really? I'm supposed to lead the way? I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Because last time I checked, they were the ones who told me I wasn't their dad. Not the other way around. She didn't say anything, just stared at me like she was out of answers. The drive home was quiet. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw my son standing near the front door, looking uneasy, like he didn't know whether to stay or run. It was obvious they'd been waiting for us. But instead of stopping, I walked past them, right into the house. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. But this time, something was different. They came after me, not with words, just quiet footsteps lingering at the edge of the living room. I didn't look up from where I was sitting. Distance had started to feel normal. Safe. Dad. It was the youngest. His voice small. Can we talk? I didn't answer right away, but I could feel him standing there. The weight of everything we hadn't said pressing down on both of us. You want to talk now? I asked quietly, eyes still on the TV. What happened to all those times you said I wasn't your real dad? Didn't seem like you needed to talk then. The guilt on his face was obvious, but it didn't bring me peace. I was tired. Tired of always being the one to fix things. Tired of holding the title of father, without any of the respect that should come with it. I didn't mean it, he said quietly. I was just mad confused. I don't even know why I said it. I could hear the honesty in his words, but it didn't erase the damage. It didn't make it all disappear. I know you didn't mean it, I replied, but it still hurt. I've spent years being there for you, and you tossed it aside like it meant nothing. He didn't know what to say, and neither did his older brother, who had been standing silently nearby, watching everything unfold. After a moment, the older one spoke. I don't know what we were thinking, Dad. I'm sorry. We both are. I looked at them, their faces red, eyes wide with apology. And even with all the regret in the room, I still couldn't shake the feeling that it might be too late. You don't just say I'm not your father and expect everything to snap back to normal when it's convenient. I said quietly. They flinched. The weight of my words landed hard. I knew they were sorry. I could feel it, but it didn't take away the hurt. It didn't undo the silence or the distance. My wife stepped into the room then, stopping in the doorway. She had heard enough. She knew how much it had cost all of us, but she didn't know how to fix it either. The boys stood there a little longer, shoulders sagging, faces caught between shame and sorrow. But it wasn't their words that changed anything. It was the fact that they finally got it. What it really meant to lose someone. Not just me, but the sense of family they had taken for granted. And I realized they weren't the only ones who had some figuring out to do. So did I? Maybe there was still a way to move forward. But it wasn't going to be easy. It would take more than apologies. It would take time. It would take trust. And it would take effort. Something we'd all lost along the way. I don't know where we go from here, I said, barely above a whisper. But if we're going to try, I need you to show me you care. Not just say it. The younger one nodded, his face pale, but his eyes steady. We will, he said, voice quiet but sure. And right then, I realized something important. It wasn't just about them, understanding what they said. It was about me, acknowledging how far I'd let the silence stretch. Maybe we could rebuild something. Maybe not the same as before, but something real. And for the first time in weeks, there was a small spark of hope.